Hi, and welcome to Sci-Fi fans. This is the midweek movie chat, and I thought it'd be something different to talk about is car chases in movies. So, what's your favourite movie that has a car chase? Mine has got to be the Italian Job, the original Italian Job, of course, involving the classic Minis. Bullitt obviously gets a mention. Can't mention car chases without talking about the Fast and Furious movies. Which one of those is your favourite? Given the fact that there's 10 and there's going to be an 11th and possibly final installment of the franchise. So, no matter how you look at it, car chases have been a staple of action cinema for decades, from high octane pursuits of classic films to the jaw dropping stunts of modern blockbusters. I'm looking at you, Fast and Furious. These scenes are designed to get our hearts racing and our adrenaline pumping, but what does make a good car chase? And what what is it for you that is a good car chase? So let's delve in, shall we, with the 1968 movie Bullitt. Now, it stars the legendary Steve McQueen, who was an accomplished racing driver himself. This features one of the most iconic car chases in film history. Steve McQueen, driving a Ford Mustang GT, weaves through the hilly streets of San Francisco in a pursuit that lasts nearly 10 minutes. The chase is famous for its realistic approach with minimal music and plenty of engine roars and tyre screeches. So, have you seen Bullitt? Have you seen that particular scene? Let me know. The scene set the standard for future car chases, and it wasn't just about speed, it was about tension and creating realism. The skill of both the driver and the filmmakers really kind of shone through, and I think it was particularly the fact that Stephen McQueen was a race driver himself. He knew how to handle a car, and I think the Ford Mustang that he had in Bullitt was his very own personal car as well. So he really knew the car inside out and was an accomplished driver himself. The obviously the other difference in 1968 is the lack of CGI, and that's used heavily in modern films, particularly the Fast and Furious franchise. The other thing that I think that sets Bullitt apart is the fact that it used actual locations, which brings a real authenticity to the movie, as well as films like The Italian Job, where they weren't necessarily in Italy, but they did have genuine locations. We're going to fast forward now to 1998 and Ronin, directed by John Frankenheimer. This film features multiple car chases, but the standout one is the one through the narrow streets of Paris. Now, what makes this chase unique is its sheer intensity and the sense of chaos it creates. The use of practical effects, real cars, and skilled stunt drivers contributed to the raw energy of the scene. The Ronin chase is a masterclass, really, in editing and cinematography and choreography. Frankenheimer, who had a background in racing, insisted on realistic speed and genuine reactions from the actors, which adds to the authenticity. And this is where I think filmmakers need to get it right. If you're going to have a car chase, what better way to do it than have car people involved? I don't think there'd be anything more lame than having a car chase in a film and nobody's really interacting, no one knows what they're doing. Now, we can't talk about car chases without talking about the Fast and Furious franchise. Now, since 2001, these movies have been pushing the boundaries of what's possible on four wheels, as well as what's possible with an awful lot of CGI. Each installment of the Fast and Furious franchise becomes more outrageous and the chases become more spectacular, from dragging a bank vault through the streets of Rio in Fast 5 to the jaw-dropping car skiving scene in Furious 7. The franchise has redefined the car chase for a new generation, but it's also lost the authenticity, I feel, because nobody takes these films seriously. Now, fascinating thing about the Fast and Furious series is how it blends practical effects with CGI to create those sequences. They do a good job at mixing those two to bring thrilling visual effects onto the big screen with mind bending, over the top antiques. They are kind of grounded with a chemistry, but that chemistry is more with the cast and the ever present family theme of the franchise itself. Now, another film that deserves a mention, and I will be going through a few films, so if I haven't mentioned your favourite one just yet, I will possibly get to it in this episode. Mad Max Fury Road, directed by George Miller in 2015, is essentially one long car chase through a post apocalyptic wasteland. The film's practical effects combined with minimal CGI result in some of the most jaw dropping stunts ever captured on film. And even when you look at the Mad Max series, I think if you go back to the original Mad Max film, there is a pattern here. And this is something that I feel Hollywood needs to be taking notice of. And that is the less CGI effects you have, the better the outcome of the film in most cases. Not in every case. I mean, there are some films with a lot of CGI that can pull it off. But if you want high intensity and believability in what you're doing and for the audience to be drawn in to the essence of the danger, essentially what's on screen, then practical effects is really the only way to do it. Now, Fury Road is a testament to the power of practical effects, and the filmmakers really did capitalize on using real vehicles and real stunts with real explosions, creating a vertical experience that immerses the audience into the chaos and the desperation of the chase. Now, of course, there are some films with really good car chases. And I mentioned The Italian Job as my favourite film. It involves my favourite car of all time, and that is the classic Mini, of course. And initially, when they wanted to do the Italian Job, they wanted they were charged for each car that they used, and Fiat actually said that they would give them Fiat 500s for free if they were to use them in the film. The filmmakers turned it down because obviously the Fiat 500 being an Italian car, and they wanted it very much a British thing. So that's why they ended up paying an awful lot of money for an awful lot of minis. Another thing that they did was, if you look closely at the end sequence when they're pushing the minis off the screen, or off the screen, out of the minibus, sorry, if you pay attention to the screen, you'll notice that some of the colours, interior colours, don't match up, and that's because they actually bought a load of second-hand cars and just sprayed the outside of them. I think the white one that goes down the mountain is actually red. If you look at the interior, it's as I say, it's got a red interior, so you can tell that it wasn't originally a white Mini. So I'm going to focus on The Italian Job now because it's a classic example, really, of what can be achieved. Again, it's for me very similar to Bullitt. It's certainly got the cult status, that legendary status of a car chase. So The Italian Job was directed by Peter Coulson and stars, obviously, Michael Caine. You probably know this already. And it's a heist film that's really kind of etched its place in cinema history, but not just for the clever plot and the charming characters that we have on screen. Benny Hill, amazing actor, very funny guy. And yeah, just iconic, really. And it's a shame, unfortunately, we've lost most of the cast of The Italian Job. They have actually passed away, and there's only one or two which are still around, Michael Caine being one of them. It has a clever plot, and this film perfectly combines British wit and high-end speed and thrills as we go through the story. The climax of The Italian Job is obviously that car chase, and that is one of the most famous car chases in history, and they did try and emulate it, I feel, but not with a lot of success with the remake. Now, the remake of The Italian Job, for me, is a good film, but it's not necessarily The Italian Job. There's only one of those, and that was made in 1969. So, after a daring gold heist, if you're unfamiliar with the story, essentially some British crooks go over to Italy and steal a ton of gold. And then the climax of the film is how do they get away with all that gold? It uses three Mini Cooper S's to navigate the streets in a thrilling and real thoughtful car chase. The city's tight, twisting streets provide the perfect sequences in masterclasses in stunt driving and choreography. And there's also a scene where they're driving through some sewers, which I believe the sewers were actually in Northampton. They hadn't actually finished off building these sewers at that point, so they were able to use those and edit it into the film as if they were in Italy. And there is a legend that goes that what they wanted to try and do within the tunnels is do a complete loop over and within the tunnel. And they tried and tried and tried, but every time they'd done it, the drag of the water didn't allow them to build up enough speed, so they kept on crashing. They managed to do it once, and would you believe it? At that one point, they weren't filming. They didn't have the cameras rolling, so they never actually got that take. I mean, that would have been phenomenal. I mean, these days, that's where they would have used probably CGI and just edit it in there. So, yeah, what's really fascinating about the car chase is the way that they utilise the unique agriculture and landscape of Turin, with the Mini starting through narrow alleyways, storm drains, staircases, and even race across rooftops. The rooftop that they race across is actually or at the time, it was the Fiat testing ground. So Fiat had this racetrack on top of their factory, which they allowed them to use for the Italian job. I'm not sure they'd get away with it these days, with it being rivalry between manufacturers and everything else being what it is now. So yeah, they were actually allowed to use that. And at one point, you were able to go up onto that rooftop in your own car and drive around it. Now that was on something, funny enough, a charity run called the Italian Job, which was set up to help the NSPCC here in the UK. So you did actually have that opportunity. I'm not sure if you can still do it, although the charity itself is still going. So I've diverted a little bit. We'll get back on track now. So the sequences they weren't just for show. They were meticulously planned and executed to showcase the agility and competency of the Mini Coopers, which almost became characters in their own right within the film. The production team faced numerous challenges while filming these scenes. Turin streets were often crowded, and securing permission to film some of the locations was very difficult. However, the cooperation of the Italian authorities and the meticulous planning by the stunt coordinators paid off. These stunts were performed by professional drivers who had to navigate real traffic and sometimes even pedestrians. Another iconic element of the car chase in the Italian Job is the use of the sewer system, as I've just mentioned. Now, this makes the Minis go through part of the daring escape underground, and they give the impression that it's Turin, but as I say, I believe it was Northampton. So, another part of the chase was across is it a dike where they have a lot of water. And what amazes me is when I watch them go across the dike in the Italian Job, is none of the minis actually conked out, which is a surprise. If you've ever owned a classic mini, then you'll know that they conk out at the merest hint of mist. It just gets into the old points condenser and electrics of the engine, and they just cough, splutter, and die normally in water. So I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't actually drag them across that dike rather than have them jump it. Michael Caine's famous line, "You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off," has become synonymous with the film, and it kind of epitomises the humour combined with the thrilling car chases, and it's a perfect balance that makes that film still relevant even now. The Italian Job has inspired countless filmmakers and music videos to reference the film within pop culture. And in 2003, the remake did pay homage to some of the originals. I suppose the character and lovability, what fans love about it, but they modernised the stunts. So it's a good film, the modern 2003 version, but it's not the film. And there's always rumours that they're going to make a sequel. So who knows? We might get an Italian Job too, but with new minis. And what would they go for? What would they chase? I don't know. One of the other films that has a classic car chase and also a classic mini in that classic car chase is the Bourne Identity. And I think this is possibly one of those car chases that gets underlooked. Not many people will reference this particular car chase, but I feel it's still worth a mention because it's possibly as iconic as the Italian Job, just for the sheer fact that they've got a classic mini going through some various scenes in France, I think it is. So, The Bourne Identity was directed by Doug Liam and starred Matt Damon, and it redefined the action thriller genre with its gritty realism and relentless pace. It wasn't the same when they replaced Matt Damon in franchise. It wasn't the same, and they did make amends by bringing him back later on. So the car chase in The Bourne Identity is definitely a masterclass in suspension and practical effects. It does take place in Paris, where Jason Bourne, played by Matt Damon, attempts to evade the police while driving a beat-up Mini Cooper. If it wasn't beat up before the car chase, it's certainly beaten up by the end of it. This scene it's notable for its down-to-earth and gritty style that eschews flashy explosions for realistic driving and intense close-up quarter action. One of the most impressive aspects of this chase is its commitment to realism, because unlike many of the other films of this era, and by today's standard as well, Bourne Identity uses practical effects and real cars to create the immersive experience. And as I was just saying earlier, if you want to immerse the audience, you can't really do that any better than using practical effects. The production team, led by director Doug Liam and stunt coordinator Nick Powell, went to great lengths to ensure authenticity, with Matt Damon undergoing extensive training to perform many of his own driving stunts. I mean, if someone offered you a job as an actor and they said, sorry, but you're going to have to learn how to do stunts in a car, are you going to turn that down? Because I wouldn't. I'd be chomping at the bit. In fact, if I'd done a film and there were cars involved in it, I'd be saying, when's the car chase going to happen and when can I learn those stunts? The Mini Cooper darts through narrow alleyways and jumps downstairs and squeezes through impossibly tight spaces, unless you are a classic mini owner, and you'll know just how great those little cars are, particularly with the agility. Now, a Mini Cooper in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing is going to be a formidable car just to get away from in a city. The production team, led by director Doug Liam and stunt coordinator Nick Powell, went through great lengths. The use of handheld cameras as well. This is how they got some of those close shots. They had handheld cameras with quick cut editing, and that further enhanced the sense of urgency and chaos. The chase on the streets of Paris posed significant challenges, though, because the crew had to navigate the city's dense traffic and narrow streets, and that often required precise coordination and timing. To maintain a realistic feel, the filmmakers opted for practical effects again. One of the most memorable moments is when Bourne drives the Mini Cooper down a set of stairs in the middle of a busy marketplace. Now, this stunt required meticulous planning, as you would expect, and precise execution. The sequence was filmed in multiple takes to ensure the safety of the stunt drivers and bystanders, demonstrating the crew's dedication to realism and safety. And I wouldn't mind betting either that they had to do that because after each take they had to fix the car. Excuse me. Because if anyone who's owned a Mini will know, they break very easily. Something else that they did with the Italian Job as well, just go back to that film, is when they did some of the scenes where the cars drive down the stairs, if you look carefully, they actually padded out those stairs with blocks of wood. And I believe that was to protect the stairs as well as the cars, because some of the scenes that they drive through, they were, quite historical locations. So in order to protect the stonework, they used, they just covered them up with wood. The success of the chase scene in The Bourne Identity contributed significantly to the overall impact of the film. It helped establish Jason Bourne as a grounded, relatable hero and set the tone for the intense, realistic action that would define the franchise. The chase has since become a benchmark for filmmakers, illustrating just how practical effects and skilled stunt work can certainly create a truly memorable film and magic. The so what other haven't covered the Fast and Furious yet, have I? So I shall just cover that. Excuse me. Sorry, I got a little bit of a cold, which isn't really good when you're trying to go live. But there you go. Right. So Vin Diesel has really taken this franchise on with making 10 films already, and the possibly the final one coming up, number 11. I've got mixed feelings about the Fast and Furious franchise. I enjoy the films, but I kind of wished that maybe he'd parked it, pun intended, to focus on other films, specifically the Riddick franchise. I'm a massive Riddick fan. I love the whole universe that he created with Pitch Black, then the Chronicles of Riddick, and then Riddick. So I do kind of, I was hoping that he'd stop making these Fast and Furious films and go back to Riddick. I might very well be getting my wish. Now, if you're a Riddick fan, you might very well be getting your wish too, because that is what he's doing. His next project, this is Vin Diesel, I believe, is actually going to be the fourth Riddick film. And I can't wait. So, since Fast and Furious debuted in 2001, the franchise has become a global phenomenon, known for its thrilling car chases and larger than life stunts with a sense of family that resonates with audience. So, Fast and Furious started off in 2001 and it was directed by Rob Cohen. The film introduced us to the world of illegal street racing in Los Angeles, although I have to say it probably isn't the only film to have introduced us to this particular scene. There are various video games, he says, and he can't remember one. No, memory's totally gone on that one. No, there was a video game series. I'll come back to that once I remember what it was. Don't get old and don't lose your memory. Need for Speed. Is that the right? Need for Speed? I'm sure it's Need for Speed is the franchise. Video game franchise, that is. Anyway, so one of the standout chases in the climatic race is where Brian O'Connor, played by Paul Walker, and Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel, race a quarter mile with a speeding train bearing down on them. This scene is iconic not just for its high-speed action, but for the way that it established the characters' bond and then set the tone for the entire franchise. And it's such a shame that we don't have Paul Walker, who unfortunately passed away in a car crash. So, yeah, I mean, that was a turning point, I think, for the franchise. The filmmakers used real cars and practical effects with minimal CGI at that time. They certainly don't use minimal CGI these days, do they? To create a raw, authentic experience, these stunt drivers performed the dangerous leap over the train track, making it one of the most memorable moments in the film. Fast and Furious 6, however, in 2013 was directed by Justin Lin, and this film took the action to a new level with a chase involving a tank on a Spanish highway. So this is why I like the Fast and Furious franchise, because they started off with a relatively serious film and a relatively serious concept, but then they kind of realized that they didn't have to take themselves so seriously. And the only way that they were going to improve on the previous film is just become more bold and more bombastic with the stunts and the driving. They've they really kind of latched into the essence that we as fans want to see, those crazy outlandish stunts and decent cars and speed. I think that's something that the Bond universe did at one stage. They realised that they could only go so far with the serious spy film, so they then started coming up with the real. I mean, Roger Moore encapsulated the difference between himself and Sean Connery with that humour, and they took it in a different style. And they've done that with Fast and Furious, but they've always maintained that family element. The tank chase required extensive coordination and planning, with the production team building a custom tank and used a combination of practical effects and CGI to bring the scene to life. The stunts include cars being crushed and flipped. They were performed by skilled drivers and meticulous choreography to ensure the safety and the realism. Then we can move on to Fast and Furious 7 from 2015, directed by James Wan. This features one of the most ambitious car chases ever filmed, the skyscraper jump in Abu Dhabi. For this scene, Dom and Brian drove a supercar through the window of one skyscraper to land on another. This jaw dropping stunt involved a mix of practical effects, real stunt driving, and CGI to create a seamless and thrilling sequence. The production team actually filmed parts of the scene with a real car and used green screens and computer effects to enhance the visuals, but we wouldn't be surprised to know that, would we? The combination of techniques created a scene that is both spectacular and believable. And that kind of shows where special effects have actually gone and how far we are with these special effects. Another standout scene is the submarine chase in The Fate of the Furious, directed by F. Gary Gray. This over the top sequence takes place on an ice plane where the team is pursued by a nuclear submarine. The chase is a testament to the franchise's willingness to push boundaries and deliver bigger and crazier stunts. Filming this scene required extensive use of practical effects, with real cars modified to handle the icy terrain. The production team built large sets and used CGI to create the submarine and the surrounding environment. The result is a heart pounding chase that showcases the franchise's commitment to delivering jaw dropping action. And yeah, I think I'm going to wrap up this episode just here. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure. If you want to check out my other social media content, you can. I'm available on YouTube, Sci-Fi Fans, TikTok, Sci-Fi Fans, Clapper, Sci-Fi Fans, and of course the podcast, Sci-Fi Fans. Bit of a theme there. Do join me on those other platforms and check out my content on there. I am on Twitter, although I don't use Twitter that often, and Facebook as well. But if you want to catch the latest and the greatest content that I create, then you'll find me mainly on TikTok and YouTube, and obviously the podcast. Thank you so much for stopping by and listening to me ramble on for nearly half an hour. I do appreciate it. Leave a comment where you're available, where we're available, if available. If you can leave a comment, then please do so. And I'll see you next week for some more movie trivia and just chat films. Thank you so much.